the USA Emergency Broadcast Network, your source for reliable disaster preparedness information.
The views and opinions expressed on this program are not necessarily the views of this station, its management, sponsors, or other hosts. If you have any comments or suggestions about this program, please contact us at radio@usaebn.org. That's radio@usaebn.org.
Welcome to the Zeta Report here on USA Emergency Broadcasting Network. My name is Andre. I'm with USAEBN, and I am usually joined by Nancy Leader from Zeta Talk and ZetaTalk.com. Nancy, welcome back to the show. Happy New Year.
Oh, thank you. Thank you. I'm so excited to be back. Today we're going to talk about leadership. What makes all those strutting politicians the leader of their country, etc.? You know, what qualities do they exude that puts them in that position other than ambition, etc.? And what happens if, as they say, the proverbial S hits the fan? What happens then? How do these people hold up? But before I launch into talking about natural leaders and how they emerge in times of crisis, I want to read our standard disclaimer. In partnership with USAEBN, Zeta Talk and the Zeta Report will be discussing the challenges of living on a planet beset with change, rising seas, increasing earthquakes and volcanic activity, weather gone wild, and the worry of what to do next in a worst-case scenario. We will also inject Zeta Talk prophecy on what is coming next and advice on readiness plans and safe locations. Whenever Zeta Talk is quoted, please remember that prophecy is not fact, it is opinion. It only becomes fact when it happens. The Zetas are remarkably accurate, but have been wrong on occasion. Bear that in mind. For more information on this subject, please visit ZetaTalk.com or the Zeta Report on YouTube. In times of crisis, often natural leaders emerge. The official leadership has failed for one reason or another, and chaos and confusion and panic prevail. The natural leader emerges and organizes action. What qualities does such a natural leader have? Let us look to some examples of failed leadership for clues. The Yellow Vest riots that seem to be taking over Europe are a clue. This might be called the Second French Revolution, as it started like the First French Revolution in France. Quoting Wikipedia, the French Revolution began in 1789. The revolution overthrew the monarchy, established a republic, and finally culminated in a dictatorship under Napoleon, who brought many of its principles to areas he conquered, to Western Europe, triggering the global decline of absolute monarchies while replacing them with republics and liberal democracies. End of the quote. And it's true, it was like someone lit a fire, a wildfire, and Yellow Vest is going that way too. In other European countries, the UK over to Canada, even in Lebanon, Yellow Vests, for different reasons, popping up all over, basically complaining about, what their leadership is doing. The rich get richer and the poor are taken advantage of. The United States was established in a similar revolt against monarchy in 1776. Quoting Wikipedia again, Patriot protests against taxation without representation culminated in 1773 with the Sons of Liberty destroying a shipment of tea in Boston Harbor. And the rest is history, of course. The common theme here is royalty, who are at base self-appointed rulers, who are allowed to do as they please with the common man. Now we have another French Revolution pending once again over taxes. The people of France are expected to pay $6 a gallon for diesel. Where Macron is not royalty, he considers himself, thus, having called himself the future king of Europe, in anticipation of his replacing Merkel as the dominant force in the European Union, another group of self-appointed rulers. The European Union is not elected, but they have issued rules that all member countries are supposed to follow, except now they are objecting to immigration and taxation rules. Lots of this objecting going on. And the EU looks like it's crumbling, but they're still holding strong, still declaring that they get to dictate. The Yellow Vest Revolution has spread through Europe and now is in the UK, where the public is enraged that the Brexit vote is being negated by Prime Minister May. The British referendum took place on June 23, 2016, 2 whole years ago, and the people have seen nothing but a long and continued stall. So here we have a few clues as to what a leader should not do. Declare yourself the self-appointed power, grasp funds for self-enrichment, have an arrogant attitude, and refuse to listen to the will of the people whose backs you are riding upon. Other clues to what makes for effective leadership could be found in our recent history here in the U.S. The Cajun Navy mustered forth during hurricanes, most notably Katrina, in response to a local broadcast for help. This bottom-up leadership, the doers becoming the de facto leaders, though presumably there is coordination amidst the crews. Quoting Wikipedia, these anonymous boat operators, dubbed the Cajun Navy, navigated their private fishing boats and other vessels through flooded New Orleans to lend a hand after the hurricane hit. Official rescuers stood to the side. In some cases, unable to navigate the streets turned waterways that demanded the navigational savvy of natives to the area. Between 350 and 400 boats and people showed up. This makeshift flotilla that became known as the Cajun Navy is credited with rescuing more than 10,000 people from flooded homes and rooftops. For the Zetas, who were asked about who would be in charge when the chaos of their predicted pole shift arrives, had this to say in 2002. The aftertime will find most of mankind in a dearth of government directives. Even small towns governed by mayors well known on the city streets to all, and traveling bands governed by chieftains will feel the lack. Insanity, depression, loss of life, and confusion will remove the firm hand so familiar from governing families, who look to their elders, the family man, the religious leader, and find them all staring, shaking their heads, and unable to speak. In these situations, leadership arises from the needy, natural leaders emerging. End of the quote from the Zetas. Certainly Katrina had that dearth. For various reasons, the National Guard was slow to arrive. No relief until General Honoré of the Coast Guard thankfully arrived. Meanwhile, natural leaders emerged. Another example of natural leaders spontaneously emerging are the volunteers who emerged during the campfire holocaust in California. Official emergency management crews were doing their best on the scene and facing death and injury, but the situation was overwhelming. Once again, natural leaders emerged to assist in spontaneous rescue because the need was there. Neighbors were pulled to safety, and trapped horses and donkeys and dogs and cats left behind were rescued. What are the qualities of a gifted leader? Confucius say, leadership is a matter of intelligence, trustworthiness, humanness, courage, and discipline. Reliance on intelligence alone results in rebelliousness. Exercise of humanness alone results in weakness. Fixation on trust results in folly. Dependence on the strength of courage results in violence. Excessive discipline and sternness in command results in cruelty. When one has all 5 virtues together, each appropriate to its function, then one can be a leader. An emerging natural leader might be autocratic if facing a clear emergency, though would have to be known to and respected by those he must lead. If the emergency being faced has many facets, with no clear expert on all these facets present, a natural leader may be the person with good organizational skills, able to sort out what needs to be done and who in the group would be the best as group leader for those tasks, If Confucius had suggestions for social consensus, another great China leader, Qin Shi Huang, was needed to merge the tribes of China into a great nation. For the Zetas, he was the Trump of China, and they both built a wall to guard against the southern borders. Studies have shown the sexes differ in their approaches to leadership. Women more likely to be a coach, while men prefer to bark orders. Another leadership style is called laissez-faire, or laid-back neglect. Seriously. If, as a leader, you want to find out who has an interest in a task, let the task suffer from neglect. Someone will take ownership. This actually works. I speak from experience. It aligns what needs to be done with personal interest among those in the group. As a manager, I used to interview all my employees on their personal ambitions and align the tasks assigned accordingly. I had the highest productivity as a result. I basically harnessed their ambition to what needed to be done instead of blocking or, arbitrarily assigned it. Lest one think a woman needs to be a smooch serving tea all the time, I also had a practice of assigning people who hated each other to the same team. Result? There were no failures, as they were always playing gotcha games with each other. Seriously. I did this, and it worked. I had to hear a lot of complaints, but I had high productivity, under budget, and on time, ahead of time. No one else matched that. Okay. The Zetas have an unusual prediction during the chaos to come. They predict many survivors will find themselves led by children. Quoting Zeta Talk, often they are children to whom most of life is startling and strange, the unfamiliar presented almost daily. To the child, this is more an adventure, an opportunity to act without constant parental admonitions. They will make suggestions and be allowed to proceed, and often lead their dazed and depressed parents and elders about like rag dolls. After the shift, women will wash and clean, gather and cook a meal, and thus be looked upon as someone who can direct activities. End of the quote from the Zetas. I saw this led by children in practice once, and I had just written that Zeta Talk. Some people came over. They had a little 4 or 5-year-old daughter with them, and they were talking about where to go, what to do next, because they were looking for land in the area. And the little child kept chirping up with suggestions, and one suggestion in particular. Finally, after about 20 minutes, the adults all settled that that's what they should do, but they didn't accredit the child. They thought it was their decision. In fact, she was telling them what to do. Very wise child. Okay. The Zetas have advised that after the hour of the pole shift, there will be a lot of fight or flight activity, not only among humans but also domestic animals. It is known that pets flee home when the rock is signaling a pending quake. The electronic screech facilitated when air bubbles squeeze out of the rock. The Zetas advise to allow horses and cattle to run free out of the barn. But what to do about humankind? You don't just say open the barn and let them run, although they may be doing that. Our village is blessed with a volunteer fire department, so the natural leaders who would rise in an emergency are already known entities. Broken legs and bloody cuts will be tended to and fires extinguished. But if you don't want fistfights and panic, have a task list ready. All that anger and fear will translate into action. I advise this. Everybody should have that. Anticipate fight or flight and fistfights and panic and screaming and yelling and getting drunk, making it worse. Okay. This is my task list. All that anger and fear will translate into action. I have a personal task list formulated for our little village. Teens should make lean-to structures from all the trash the hurricane-force winds tossed about. We are anticipating rains. Who wants to get wet? You want a dry mattress? Then pull mattresses under these lean-tos so they don't get wet in the rain. Little kids should find plastic dishes and cups and get them ready, wash them, and set a table and chairs rescued from the trash because we got to eat. And who's going to make the meal? And while the adults chase after stampeding cattle, slaughter any caught in barbed wire or with broken limbs for a big barbecue that night. So, much better than fist fights. Everybody sits down for a barbecue and talks about, well, all right, what do we do next? But fight and flight has been avoided. So that's my lecture on natural leaders, and I've prepared a few items that Andre and I could talk about because we surely have time left, and yes, we do. One of them is about the big quake that we had in Anchorage. The thing that was noted by me as like a shock was the way the roads were torn up. There was no way in or out of Anchorage. Anchorage itself, for some reason, they claimed it was because they were newer buildings and had been built with earthquakes in mind, retrofitted to begin with. And they said all they had was a few, shelves tossing their contents onto the floor. There wasn't any buildings crumbling. There weren't any big cracks opening up. There wasn't any burst water or gas mains, but the roads. I mean, it was, I've never seen anything like it. It was like entire, across all four lanes of the highway and the on and off ramps, just like a gigantic Godzilla came and went whoop. There wasn't anything left. And they showed these pictures, and I thought, holy cow. I one of the things that we have lectured on in Zeta Talk from the start is do not assume, folks, that when the time of the last weeks and the time of the pole shift is right around the corner, that you can say, okay, grab your stuff, we're going to Uncle Bob's now, that you can get out of town with your car. There's like 25 things that can go wrong. One is that there's no gas. Another is that your city may be blockaded. Someone may decide that they don't want you in the neighboring suburbs. That happened in Katrina. They wouldn't let the people trying to escape the city cross the bridge, because there were wealthy suburbs over there. Or you could have broken bridges and ripped up roadways. You can run out of gas because everybody fills their tank up, and then you run out, and there you are. But mainly, the roadways will not survive. They will be ripped up. They're being ripped up today in little bits and pieces, and then they go and fix the bridge, and they fix the roadway, and they repair the sinkhole, and then you're back to normal. Don't be cocky. Don't think you can do that.
Don't assume
right.
that your escape route or your travel route that you have planned out for, pole shift or whatever bug out plan you have.
Yeah.
Don't assume that those roadways are going to be usable, as recent things in Anchorage.
You could go a little pedal bike. You could use a pedal bike or walk. But not everybody can walk. But the roadways are wow. Here's what the Zeta said in 2007 already. Quoting, living in a large crowded cities are living on borrowed time, as the earthquakes will come to these cities and well before the pole shift, dropping the buildings into their foundations and bursting gas, water, and sewage mains, creating not only injury but a holocaust amid the rubble and broken roadways that prevent escape. So over in India, we have cracks in the earth appearing worldwide and in accordance with the 7 of 10 plate movements predicted by the Zetas, which have been gradually happening. Indonesia first, sinking and pushing under, and we've had Krakatoa blowing on that front. And then you go over to South America roll up and down the Andes, etc., and that sinks the Caribbean plate gradually. Trinidad is ripping apart. Then you go over to Africa, they're rolling, and thus you have all those volcanoes, Etna, etc., in Italy blowing recently. And it goes on like that, and one of these days we'll have the New Madrid adjustment too for the United States, and it'll rip those Mississippi bridges, which carry a lot of gas and oil, by the way. Distribution crosses the Mississippi with those big pipelines. A lot's going to go awry when we have the New Madrid adjustments. The 7 of 10 scenarios described several plate movements, and for this to occur, something has to release the deadlock. The current stalemate is always in India, the current lock, so that when India is driven under the Himalayas and New Zealand, etc., rises, that releases activity around and it usually goes from west to east and wrapping around the world. In the opinion of the Zetas, South America is next after the sun to plate adjustments. It rolls its top part to the west while the tip of South America stays firmly attached to Antarctica. While South America rolls, it slides across the Caribbean plate. And then we have cracks all up and down the Andes, across the plate in Argentina and up into Central America, in Panama, Guatemala, and Costa Rica. Cracks galore. I had this on a newsletter recently. These huge cracks opening up, and people stand there agape and wonder. Quoting Zeta Talk again, meanwhile, South America is showing signs of a roll to the west as the Indo-Australia plate tilts and lifts. This allows the Pacific plates to shift west, which allows South America to shift west also. Then Africa rolls like a mirror to the South America roll in a different direction. South America rolls to the west, its top part. Africa rolls its top part to the east, while once again the tip of Africa stays nailed at Antarctica. This is apparent in Africa in the Rift Valley in Kenya and Uganda and the Far Triangle, which I am showing on my YouTube video to follow this hour, have ripped open these huge cracks. Down in South Africa, they say, what causes this? Quoting Zeta Talk once again, when South America rolls almost in step with the folding Pacific, it tears the Atlantic Rift on the southern side. This allows Africa freedom to move, and it rolls too, dropping the Mediterranean floor above Algeria. And all that hoodoo in Italy, it's right there along where the African plate rolls and rips and rumbles through the Mediterranean. And there we are. We're having Krakatoa, Etna, etc., all kinds of odd tidal waves, tsunamis, because we are wobbling more, and the wobble incites the 7 of 10 plate movements to speed up. It's like jerking something back and forth. Juke, 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 juke. That'll do it. In Mexico, the North American continent is slow to rip at the New Madrid, though this is certainly predicted by the Zetas, because North America is a flat top. This can be seen in a straight line running from Vladivostok through the Arctic to Greenland. Straight line, so the plates cannot roll. This plate cannot roll. Thus, as the Pacific compresses and the Atlantic rips open, the tip of Mexico is pulled westward. Thus, huge tracks once again open up in Mexico.
Quick question/comment in regard to the land cracks. I know that there's been an amazing uptick in the amount and sizes of. I mean, we're talking land cracks. We're not talking about earthquakes per se or tremors. This is just separation of the land from itself. So a big crack forms out of nowhere in your village or across the road or what have you. It happens a lot in South America, and it's been happening more so in Central America and moving its way north through Mexico, as you just mentioned. I did see some reports of a pretty decent, I think it was 1.5, maybe 2 kilometer long crack in Utah. That was a couple of weeks ago. Do you see that one where people are peering down the abyss and it seems to go on to, I don't know how deep it is. It looks like it goes through the plate, and it's just a crack. It's not an earthquake, but it's just the land opened up.
I didn't see that one, but I have seen big cracks in the southwest. I think it was Arizona. Yeah, and oftentimes in very dry land, but it's not where there's a swamp, clearly because everything's mushy and you wouldn't see the crack. You would just notice something different. But yeah, it's the rock layers underneath that they don't move as one. It's not like a solid granite block. Plates are composed of various rock layers, and they can shift and slide over each other, which is one thing that releases methane gas, which we've had an awful lot of in the last 20 years, too. You know, birds dropping out of the skies, fish, big fish kills. People say, well, what caused? Well, it's methane gas. You know, the canary in the coal mine is legendary because canaries are sensitive to methane, which can explode. So they take the canary down with the miners, and if it's singing away, all is well. But if the canary drops dead, then you get out because you're about to have an explosion, you know, and then miners get trapped. So the canary in the coal mine, fish are also very sensitive. They get Ebola, they get bubbles in their bloodstreams, and then kills them, you know, like a stroke or something like that. So, but these are harbingers of all the methane, which can be seen as light towers. At times, it'll be like a straight light going up, a flame, because methane rises faster than air, and when it gets up there, lightning can set it afire, and there it is, like a flash of light went up. So that's one sign that the rock layers are pulling apart because there's trapped vegetation. Anytime you have a lot of rock movement or like a pole shift and things are shifting back and forth, you will get, you know, vegetation slid between rock layers, and there it sits, you know, for eons until it's released. Meanwhile, methane is generated by these anaerobic bacteria that don't need oxygen, and when it's released to the air, boom, that is, in fact, according to the Zetas, what caused Tunguska in the past. It was not a meteor. They said, oh, well, there was a flash of light and it went back down toward the ground. Well, yes, because the methane rose set aside fire by lightning, which went down along the methane path to Tunguska, and boom. And how do I know that? Because the Russians themselves went in and researched, looking for any kind of meteor explosion debris, and found nada. It was not a meteor, according to the Russian scientists. Of course, you're not told that in school, but you're not told, you're a lot of irrelevant garbage is taught to you in school. We're no longer the flat Earth, but it doesn't get much better, you know. So you have to have your thinking caps on all the time. So this big neon blue cloud that touched down, I say touchdown over New York City, there was a transformer explosion. And that's the official excuse. Oh, it was just a
right.
Well, yes, transformers do explode, and they cause a lot of light in that particular area. They do not, 360 around as far as the eye can see, a beautiful light blue. People said, oh, no, what was that? You know, well, that was a neon cloud, and in fact, let's put the horse before the cart. The cloud caused the transformer to explode because neon clouds, which have been around, at least as part of my Zeta Talk archives since 2009, are the charged tail of Nibiru, and I say charged because it's all electrical. Nibiru is a magnetic body, and it's shrouded in all this red dust, which is iron oxide, because as it went through the asteroid belt, which it smashed to pieces when it went through there in the past, it picks up all this red dust, which is iron, forms magnets and is attracted and fixates to north and south. Every little atom in iron fixates to north and south poles. So it's the tail, which is formed from all this dust, is charged, and it swarms toward the Earth and wafts about, and it also has greasy elements. Where does the grease come from? According to the Zetas, the asteroid belt had many small planets that were water planets. They bore life, and life, of course, has bio whatevers, and so this was floating about, and there's petrol elements in the greasy tail. So you have this combination of, magnetic, inclined to incite lightning, or attracted to electricity and the petro elements. And so the neon cloud is basically set alight, as it's, but now it's starting to touch down to ground. We have not had this before. Remember when we had the Norway swirl, and I can't remember exactly, was it 2014, or 2009, 2014, etc. Then it was a swirl in the sky with this blue, like a screw point that came down to Earth. And everybody said it was a rocket exhaust, and the Russians set off a rocket. If you need to find something to blame, you blame the Russians somehow, But it wasn't.
Yeah.
That's not what a rocket exhaust looks like at all. We had a pink cloud over London at one point, and things like that have appeared here and there. Well, this was a big. To show how much this affected the United States on that day and how close it came to the ground, here we go with CenturyLink having outages of the 911 calls all across the United States. They are apparently very heavily used for emergency response 911 communications. CenturyLink, I think, is like the biggest one of the biggest telecoms, in the world. So down there in Mobile, Louisiana, which I have to tell you is a swamp, and I looked up their headquarters, and their headquarters are literally footed right next on the same level as this big lake, which is a swamp. So EMP loves water. And if it touched down over New York City, it touched down there too, because the videos that people captured showed multiple transformers blowing at that location. And that's it. So neither CenturyLink nor New York City is explaining exactly what caused their transformers to blow. There's always some excuse, but usually they just say, it's under investigation, we'll get back to you, and then they never do.
I find it interesting, too, with the New York blue light issue. Is well documented via social media and people with cell phones, and then it gets on the regular mainstream media. Well, a couple of days after the fact, I think it might have been the day after, whatever talking head was out there discussing what might have caused this quote-unquote transformer explosion, we'll call it the blue light, it definitely was not aliens. They made sure to get that out there.
Oh, yes.
Definitely wasn't aliens. I'm like, oh, you're positive. Okay, well, you got that cut to the chase. One day, can't figure out what happened on 9/11, but, we got that figured out in like 12 hours.
Yeah.
I love that.
Because a lot of people, that was the rumor. There's enough sci-fi movies that start that way, with strange lightning in the sky, and then
blue light or blue beam or
and then here they come, and then they suck your brains out in your spinal column and eat it, and just the worst, scariest thing that they can come up with. Well, if aliens could do that, then what's holding them back? There are clearly rules that prevent them from marauding mankind. You can tell that because it hasn't happened. And why would they hold back? They're saving it for a holiday? I mean, come on. They're not allowed to do that. Talking about aliens, what about China landing on the dark side of the moon and sending back images? Now, this is another big alien hoodoo, because when we went up there with the Apollos, we didn't go to the dark side, for whatever reason. We stayed on the light side. And the Zetas at that time said, well, NASA and JPL, et cetera, they were in MJ-12, the new burgeoning MJ-12 in 1947. They were talking to aliens, and they heard that on the dark side of the moon, which is really the far side that we never see, there were the nasty aliens were living in housing there, and you wouldn't want to go there, and you wouldn't want to show that to people because they weren't covering up at all. So that between the Apollo missions, which finally got canceled because They were more concerned that mankind would become aware that their alien presence was real than anything else. So they closed them down. They said, no, no more emissions. And now China's going up there and showing pictures, and where is it? Well, the Zeta said between the Apollo missions and the current time frame when, for the last maybe 5 years or so, China has been going up there with the Chang 2 and the Chang 3 and Chang 4. The Chang 3 was Jade Rabbit, Chang 4 now up there. These guys had to scuttle away because the rules are that mankind should not be absolutely undeniably aware of the alien presence. That is considered too shocking, and they want people to gradually become aware. So it's called the element of doubt rule. And now the element of doubt rule will no longer be broken because these badass aliens on the dark side of the moon, they've left. And China can go up there and set up a moon base. They set up a biolab to find out silkworms, fruit flies, various germinating seeds, all tended by a little robot. And the data will come back, and then they'll say, yes, we could have a moon lab up there. People can live there. We know that for sure.
Now, with the far side of the moon, too, I think a lot, well, other than it was no-fly zone, basically, according to the Zetas, for the Apollo program, I think a lot of the technology that we had back then, similar problems with the Chang missions, is when you're on the far side of the moon, you don't have a direct line of communication, radio frequency rise with the Earth. So you have to bounce it off of you have to bounce your communications off of another farther out satellite and then back to the Earth, which makes it difficult to coordinate landings. Obviously, you want to be communicating with the lander and all that good stuff on the far side. But my question is, now if these service to self you said badass aliens have left that side of the moon, let's say, wouldn't there be structures left over that rover or that could be picked up on images coming back, or is that going to be scrubbed too? Because there was images on the Apollo landings where they saw lights and ships, and those were edited out or deleted.
Right. But I don't think that's going to be necessary anymore now. On the Apollo, we're seeing, other than seeing something coming from the far side of the moon over the horizon, like a spaceship, they said, oh, there's something over there. That's as much as they got on the far side on images. But what we did see was, at one point there was an astronaut said, we're not the first, and he was kind of shook up, so that, and they did try to scrub out as much of that as possible, even filmed in a warehouse so that they could use that filming, where the flag seemed to be reacting to some kind of wind or atmosphere, and everybody said, it's fake, we never went to the moon. Well, the Zeta said, we did both. And they did that in the warehouse so that they would have something they could substitute in case they needed it, because they were broadcasting live to the public. So, there had been all kinds of things that had been discovered on the side of the moon that we see that look suspiciously like, well, that's a house, well, that's an opening into an underground bunker, well, that's even a little statue of an Anunnaki, that was that type of thing. And they said, well, come on, and so the secret is out, but it's not considered so definitive that the element of doubt is busted, I guess. So now, I don't think that China, I really don't know, but I don't think they intend to create a human moonscape or moon biosphere on the dark side. I think they just wanted to set up that lab because the lab has the worst bombardment from outer space. The moon has no atmosphere. Yep. and therefore all gamma rays and all neutrons and everything else under the sun that can come striking it and affect life are going to be hitting there. Presumably, on the light side of the moon, or the side that we see from Earth, things will be much better, and that's where they would settle up so that they could transmit directly and not have to bounce off a satellite or something weird. Yeah.
Yeah, I guess that the far side of the moon would definitely get more, not only with the micrometeorites, but gamma radiation, other types of particles, that sort of thing, just because it's facing outer space, whereas the light side of the moon, or the part that faces the Earth, even though it's separated by millions of miles or what have you, it's still like being on the underside of an umbrella. Not all the way. I mean, you're still, but you're protected from a lot of that extra radiation. So as far as humans going up there, well, I mean, we just cut to the chase. Just go on the interior, and you're protected from everything. So, we can talk about that too.
Yeah, so I'm featuring all of that in this upcoming newsletter too. About, I think this week I had the dark side of the moon, or next week, and all this about neon clouds. You folks, you go to my newsletters. I've been at this. I'm newsletter number 640. Well, one a week. How many years is that? At least 6-7 years. So a lot of information there, and I try to link back, to earlier newsletters. We have a search engine on the site, which is very helpful, and then I try to link as often as possible to the poleshift.ning.com, which is a sister website run by a group of people who are fans of Zeta Talk, and it has that focus, and they talk about the Earth changes, and people, post about EMP and the weather, and recent photos of Nibiru, and on. So there's a lot of data out there to be researched. If you're new to this subject, jump in.
Yeah, absolutely. Check it out at zetatalk.com, and also the sister site, as you mentioned, poleshift.ning.com. And then what we do with our episodes here and other breaking news or uploads that Nancy decides to do will end up on the YouTube channel for Nancy Leader. So usually the day after our live show on the first Mondays of every month, Nancy's kind enough to add images and a little bit more flesh out the visuals on the YouTube for Nancy Leader. So check that out.
And I don't want to ignore USA EBN, because we've been at this for 2 to 3 years. Andre, I know it's more than 2.
Longer than that.
Yeah. And in-depth discussion about vitamins in nature. You used up all your vitamins in the bottle, and what are you going to do? Weeds and bugs have all the vitamins you need, really. And how to get electricity, how to build a windmill from car parts, etc., how to save seeds, gardening tips, fishing tips, houseboat tips, etc., so that, it's an in-depth discussion, where Zeta Talk posting is, well, here's a few phrases, and the poleshift.ning, it's got a focus like bridges are going down or something like that. When Andre and I do it, we beat it to death.
No, we're talking about preparedness, though. I mean, we're bringing out the information, obviously, with the news of signs of pole shift / Nibiru, but then also we will provide ways to survive it, because it is survivable, because it's happened before, and we're still here as a species. So that's a fact right there.
That's right. And actually, it's going to be fun. You have to look upon it. The school's out. The kids don't have to go to school. They love working and doing real stuff with their parents, or helping grandpa in the shop or whatever, because this is real. And you go to school, and it's now a history, and whatever happened in 1877, like, who cares? And the same thing with working, punching the clock, listening to a boss, doing the same thing over and over again, just so you can get your paycheck, whether it's irrelevant or not. Instead, you're going to be doing things that matter to people around you, and you're going to be in shape. it's a fact that during the Great Depression that heart disease went down because people weren't, pigging out on food and sitting around. They got up, they had to work, they had to hustle to grow and get